And I'm hoping that we can get through this within the next about 25, and then we will be good to go. Okay. Perfect. All right, so for many of you, this is going to be the screen that you are going to see when you are getting ready to actually start listing your space. So the very first thing that they're going to ask you is this listing address. As we are going through this, I want you to understand that if you are someone who you're saying, I want to do this the personal route, I don't want my complex to know that I'm doing this, it might be best for you to not use the exact address of the property, meaning that you are using the address of maybe a business that's across the street or a business that's the block down, so that when people, because many apartment complexes actually have scanning softwares and technology to scan through these sites and see whether or not people are listing their space on short-term rental platforms. And even furthermore, sometimes they're just going to search Airbnb. They're going to search the location. If those people who don't realize, who, number one, you got your name, a smiling face of you, your name, your first and last name, on top of that, the exact address of the complex, you've given them everything. You've given it all away. They know for a fact that you are doing this when you are not supposed to. So if you are someone who, again, you're going through corporate leasing, they know that you are listing on these platforms, it's completely fine to go ahead and put the exact property address. But if you're someone who you want to keep this under the radar, go ahead and choose an address of a business that is close by or nearby, just so that these complexes are not searching that location and now they're able to see and select your listing. Because I've even seen complexes go ahead and book an Airbnb as if they are a guest. I don't know many that go this far, but book as if they are a guest and then go ahead and say, all right, we caught you. Now that we've booked, we caught you. How is the address used on Airbnb? So the address is then going to show the approximate location. So if we go in and whenever you search on Airbnb, you see that map function and it's showing you where they are, that's where it is. Now you're able to opt into sharing the approximate location. Of course, it's going to share that approximate location, but you can even opt further to say, okay, I don't want to share the exact location with guests until it's 5 days before they're coming to be into the unit. The address that is going to give them if you book is going to be the address that you're putting on here. So for instance, with my apartment units, even though we have a corporate lease and they are completely fine with us doing Airbnb, when we got into the units, they said, you know what, we are actually going through some management changes right now. We're all right with you doing Airbnb. We'll include it in the addendum. But for right now, we don't want photos of the unit showing up on Airbnb. So at that point, that is when I then chose the location of a business that was right next to the building. And at that point, that is the address that typically guests are going to see when they're planning their travel, right? Some people say, okay, we're trying to plan where we're going during the city. We want to know where we are so we can know how to get around to places, which is understandable. However, my guest, if they book the unit, you're not going to get the exact address until about 3 days before booking. And we say this within our pre-booking messages. So upon booking, we let you know that, hey, you booked our space. Please keep in mind that the address that you see attached to your reservation is actually to a business nearby. You're going to receive the exact address about 3 days prior to checking into your reservation. And that's how we play it. And thus far, we haven't had any issues. So I am just putting in some filler here. Let's just do this. So let's, again, first thing that they're going to ask is the address. So now that we have the address, they're asking about the property type. As you all can see, there are a number of types of properties that you can use. This is why I say start where you are. If you have a tent in your backyard, there are tents on Airbnb. So just please understand that it does not just have to be a house. It does not just have to be an apartment. You can have, again, secondary unit. That's the tiny house. You can have a unique space, bed and breakfast, boutique hotel, what have you. For us, we're going to go ahead and choose apartment just for example purposes. And then just to narrow it down, we're going to say what type of apartment is it? So is this a rental unit? Is this a condo? Is it a service apartment? Loft, what is it? For us, it's going to be rental unit. For many of you, it's going to be rental unit. Then the type of space that guests will have. This is when you're then able to say, Okay, for instance, with my house, if I was wanting to opt to rent the house room by room, it's a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bathroom, and I was opting to rent it room by room, that would be a private room that they are getting. If it's a hostel type of situation, you can even have shared rooms in here where it's bunk beds. But for many of you, you are going to be renting the entire place. It's, again, just many different people search for places on Airbnb. It's just catering to all of those types of people. Shared rooms are for more people who are looking to be on the cheaper side. You don't mind sleeping in the same room as somebody else. Private room is for someone who I still want to be able to lock it, but we share main spaces like a kitchen or a bathroom. And then the entire place is, again, for where most of you are opting, you're giving them the entire place. The entire place is dedicated to Airbnb. And then is it set up for guest space? Yes. Please, again, just understanding that Airbnb started as a platform where people were renting their own spaces in their own homes rather than a different space that they had completely. So that is why this question is here too. Okay, so for the most part, again, very intuitive. We're going through how can you accommodate guests. I'm just gonna go through this again, just watch my screen pretty quickly because I feel like some of you may have even gone through this. I wanna get to the good stuff that's not necessarily as intuitive. So guests that you can accommodate for many of you, if you're getting a 1-bedroom, 1-bathroom, I'd knock it down to 3. You can go up to 4, completely up to you, but I would knock it down to 3. How many bedrooms can the guest use? 1 bedroom, because it is a 1-bedroom. How many beds do you have? You might have 1, or you might have 2. It depends, meaning a sofa bed as well. But for right now, we're gonna put 1 within bedroom 1. You can see, you can add what type of beds do you have. This is why we say queen. And then you can also do king as well. As you can see, it's not one of the first options, meaning that many people who are renting spaces on Airbnb typically go the queen route. This is why I actually recommend having a king within your unit, because it's gonna set you apart in that way too. All right, and then common spaces, you can put whether you have a couch, do you have a sofa bed? We got those too, and those are gonna show up as well. Go in, how many bathrooms? Many of you, you're gonna have 1 bathroom, 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. Where is it located? And as you can see here, guests will only get your exact address once they booked a reservation. That is when they get the exact address. So at that point, this is just a filler address that we've used. They're asking us to confirm that. Adjusting the pen. This is where the pen is. Yes, that's right. All right, now with amenities, this is where you really want to, again, begin paying attention to what you are choosing, because you want to make sure this is actually going to help you know, what should I be having in my unit, right? Do you have all of these? The more of these that you check off, the more search results you are going to show up in. So typically for all of you, there is going to be a private entrance. There is going to be essentials. You're providing towels, you're providing linens, you're providing cooking basics. There might be a desk. I'm going to say yes, because some of you have said that you want to cater to corporate travelers. If you are catering to corporate travelers, please have a desk in there. Please. Iron, hair dryer, these are normal items. Whether or not you want to provide shampoos and soaps, completely up to you. Looks better if you do have the little cute soaps, gives it more of a hotel feel, but up to you. Hangers, absolutely. TV, absolutely. Heating, yes. Wi-Fi, yes. If you are wanting to cater to more families, having a travel crib may be helpful too. Breakfast, coffee, tea. I would say only select this. Understand that you don't have to be providing a full breakfast, but even if it's just, hey, we provide like packs of oatmeal in the breakfast bar, it's the coffee, the teas, and packs of oatmeal. That's still breakfast, coffee, tea. Air conditioning, absolutely. And then most will not have a fireplace. Smoke detector, carbon monoxide detector usually comes within most of those initial listings. First aid kit, I say yes. Fire extinguisher, absolutely. Lock on the bedroom, because again, the more check marks we put here, the more search results we're showing up within Airbnb, because these are different filters people are able to select for the types of things that they're looking for within a listing. Now, what space can guests use? Include common areas, but don't add spaces that are not on the property. So if I don't have a hot tub, I'm not gonna add a hot tub just because it's right here. If you have laundry and you're providing those services or access to your units, laundry. Is there an elevator? There is parking. Do they have access, for many of you in apartment complexes, to the pool and the gym? This is a really good question that you want to think about, because typically in order to get into those amenities that are for residents, you need a fob. How are you going to get this fob to the guest? So be mindful that even though your unit may have a pool and a gym, are you actually going to be allowing guests to gain access to it? That's a good question for you to think about. And then we can say just here, email me later about adding accessibility features, meaning just they're going to ask about stairs, elevators, all of that. This is then going to go into photos. We're not going to add any photos for right now. We're going to skip it. And then this is now getting into describing your place for your guests. So again, your listing description. This is where we say you want to make sure you are talking directly to your ideal guest. Talking directly to your ideal guest. So as we go through each of these, I'm just gonna put some filler information in here right now, and then I'm actually gonna show you how my listing is set up for the apartments. So for right now, I'm actually just going to copy this, just these sentences, just so that we can have something in here to move forward. And then you all will see mine in just a second. And then again, creating a title. So as you can see, adjective, typically, right? The type of space that it is, the unit type, and then they're having some type of key amenity. So luxurious 1-bedroom LED smart home featuring free parking. Another example that they're giving, starting with location, because Buckhead is a hot location, obviously. Buckhead, glass high-rise seconds from Lenox. This is terrible. Do not do this. Their title is Welcome to Atlanta. Don't do that. That's far too simple. But for us, again, the example that we gave earlier, let's just say we're going to put charming. And as you can see, there is a limit on the number of characters. So please play around with this, but I encourage you to use all of the characters. So charming, charming, we're going to say charming APT in city center, because you all are in different cities, with king bed. And maybe view, because that might be helpful too. And as you can see, this is again telling them, okay, what type of space is it? It's an apartment. Where is it at? Right in the city. And it has a king bed and a view. It's already speaking to, again, these ideal guests that we may be welcoming pretty soon. If this is something that your ideal guests care about, it could be king bed and a desk. It doesn't have to be view. If it's a desk because you're actually catering to corporate travelers, that is going to be helpful too. But just whatever there, because again, we already know the syntax, and you can also find how you're able to create your listing title within the Facebook group as well. So these are the different guest requirements, and where we're starting to get into background checks and are we accepting people with ID verification or not. Initially, Airbnb just tells all guests, okay, you have to have an email address, a phone number, and your information on how you're going to pay. And before booking, they have to agree to your house rules, all of that. As you can see, they're not requiring a government issued ID. So we had to click add additional requirements. And for each of my listings, I absolutely say you have to have a government issued ID submitted to Airbnb. And for many people, being recommended by other hosts and having no negative reviews is helpful. For me, I don't want anyone with negative reviews in my space. If you have less than like a 3-4 star review, we are going to talk about it. I might reach out and say, hey, what happened? I see you have a review. Can you tell me a little bit more about that stay that you had? And if they don't have a proper explanation, I am going to deny them, because that is a risk that you are going to take. And when you actually start to get into it, you are going to see how very risky it is accepting guests who are in your city, but they're trying to book an Airbnb in your city, accepting guests who have 0 reviews, accepting guests who have previous negative reviews. It does not necessarily help. The lowest review I'll accept is a 4-star, because in order for you to, like, I don't know, if you have a 2-star review, that is a problem on Airbnb, if you have a 2-star review. And then yes, the issue with actually declining bookings. So when you are declining bookings, understand that with Airbnb, if they are pushing your listing and they're showing your listing to people, and the same people that you're showing them to, you are continuously declining them, you have every right to decline whoever you would like to decline. but continuous declines in a row, Airbnb is going to send you a notification and say, hey, we see that you're declining some of these bookings. What's the reason? Because they want to make sure that, number one, it's not because of any, I guess, racial discrimination or anything like that. But number two, they're going to want to have some type of, I guess, padding or information behind that so that they can know whether or not they should continue pushing your listing to these same types of people. So again, that hurts or hinders your SEO when you continuously decline guests based on, if you have nothing, right? Even if it's not based on a negative review, you're just like, well, you have no reviews, decline. This is why you want to message your guests, ask them, have pre-booking messages. We'll talk through those too. Okay. Now, house rules, we talked through as well, whether or not they're suitable for children. I typically say that my units are not suitable for infants, but they could be suitable for children, not suitable for pets. I just don't want to deal with the pet hair, because some people, like a guest can bring a pet and then the next guest that comes in, they could be allergic. And now we have a problem on our hands. Whether or not smoking is allowed, I do not allow smoking. I do not allow events. This is where you're then going to add all of your additional house rules. For the most part, I will tell you all that when you get to this point and you're going through actually like putting your listing up, going through it this way is one way that you can do it. But if I exit out of here, which I'm going to do in a minute, you're going to see how you're able to then see all of the settings at once. So we don't have any additional rules for right now. I always say add them because those additional rules are going to help, again, just cover your butt when guests are acting out. So for instance, I believe I had given an example of one guest I had where there was like negative review. She left a negative review, but we had never heard from her during the reservation. We checked in, she said nothing. But because in our house rules and in our house manual, we state that, hey, if you have any issues whatsoever, please reach out to contact us so we can remediate that issue. And she never did. Airbnb was able to remove that negative review. So this is why I say it can cover your butt, because what you place in here can in some way still uphold. Even though I have already mentioned to many of you that if somebody throws a party and they damage nothing, typically Airbnb is not going to do anything about that, even if no parties is within your reservation, because what are they giving you? What security? Oh, the security deposit. That is why you then take a security deposit offline from Airbnb as well. You all, as we get into this, we're going to see with that security deposit, Airbnb actually does not take it from every single guest. They take it from specific guests who have a, I forget the phrase that they use, but it's like a high risk profile. That's the ones that they take a security deposit from. And then again, just letting guests know, no, for most of these, typically, most of you might say that you do have surveillance or recording devices on the property, Ring doorbell, security camera. On the exteriors, we have security cameras on the exteriors of all of our units in each corner. So that is something that we let people know because you have to. And if you were someone who was opting to have a camera inside the unit, up to you, but you can only have cameras inside common spaces. And if you do have them inside, you have to, any type of surveillance, you have to actually note that within your reservation that you have that. It cannot be a matter of the guest showing up and they're just now finding out about the camera. Okay. So how guests are gonna book, et cetera, et cetera. They're saying to keep your calendar up to date. We're about to dive into just what this looks like once you actually get past all of this. So most of you are gonna be new to this and you wanna rent out or have guests as often as possible. Now they're going to then show us the calendar settings based on, okay, do you want to actually, again, booking lead time, how much notice do guests need or how much notice do you need before guests arrive? I do same day bookings. But for some of you, let's say that you're in a complex that requires background checks and you might be running your own background checks. At that point, you may then say, all right, we require 3 days of notice before a guest arrives, meaning that you have to book at least 3 days in advance so that we can get your background check through and processed and over to the apartment complex. And then of course, just when they're checking in, it's up to you. But as always, again, we are mirroring hospitality, hotels. Typically that checkout is going to be right about 11 a.m. and then check-in is going to be about 3 p.m. If you are someone who you have a keypad lock, you have a smart lock, a lockbox where guests can just let themselves in, you are going to have a start time, but you're likely not going to have an end time. So this is when you are then choosing flexible, meaning that you can check in anytime after 3 because you're going to check yourself in. But if you do have to meet them, that is when you want to put a time block within there of you can only check in between 3 and 5. If you cannot check in between 3 and 5, we cannot accept you, because if you're having to meet them, you don't want to have to meet a guest at 9 p.m. to let them into that unit. Are background checks common for corporate leases? Absolutely. Absolutely, absolutely. And then even furthermore, just in terms of people who are kind of flying under the radar as well, they are becoming more common because there's more fraudulent activity going on with short-term rentals now, meaning people are getting into these rentals, they're maybe not using their name, or they're getting into these rentals, and again, they're trying to find all of these issues that are wrong and then wrongfully request a reimbursement, or they're getting in and they're refusing to leave. So this is why more hosts are opting to know more about the guest and running that background check. How far in advance can guests book? This is going to be up to you and your availability. I typically only allow at most 3 months in advance. And then even as of recently, we've only allowed about a month's time, meaning that now that we're in September, October is open, but November isn't. Because for me, I like to think about, because I go for the dynamic pricing strategy, I need to know what's going on in the city in order to properly price my unit. So if I allow people to book 6 months in advance, they now might know about a concert before I do, and they book it in advance, and now they've gotten a crazy discount for a weekend where I probably could have charged like $1,200. So that is why I do the pricing strategy I do, and I only allow about 3 months in advance, if at all. And then if you go the dates unavailable by default, that's when you're then just able to open them up as you have the time. So this is when I usually would open up this month and next month, and then November's blocked. And once we get to October, I open up October, November, and that everything else is blocked. Okay. Getting through, guys. How long can guests stay? This is again now getting into those minimum and maximum stay requirements. For many of you, I'm going to say every time, do not allow guests to stay within your space more than 28 days. For stays longer than 28 days, yeah, you can manually approve them. I typically am going to deny them just because of squatter issues. And even furthermore, now that I've had the issue and the guests didn't even stay 28 nights, I'm even more hesitant for longer stays. But I will say that just look at the different laws, the rental laws within your city, like where you're actually doing business, because it varies whether or not that threshold is, if somebody stays within your unit 14 days straight, they now have tenant rights, or is it 28 days? But really look at that for your city so that you know that before you accept this, because it might take a while to get to that point, but there are really shiesty people out here who will get in and they will know these laws and they will stay in your unit just to do it. Okay. Now we've already said that they are unavailable by default, but we're going to unlock those 5 just for now. And then this is where this pricing then comes in, and we're going to dive into just my end of my listing too. So again, this is where I told you Airbnb recommends you smart pricing, meaning that they are then going to say, hey, we're going to set your pricing and we're going to automatically keep your nightly prices as competitive as possible based on the demand that's in your area. I'll give companies within the Facebook group. I have a list of companies for background checks tomorrow. So then if you're using this smart pricing, because again, the way that they set this piece up, you're now looking at it and you're seeing that you think you're setting your pricing tools, but really you're setting up smart pricing for Airbnb. So if we wanted to not use smart pricing, that is when we're going to then use a base price only, of meaning that this is my default price for every day. And then as days go on, I am going to go in and change something. I'm going to change the weekend dates and increase those, et cetera, et cetera. So you're able to either use that base price, and the base price is when you're then setting your own prices, or you're setting up smart pricing. And when you're setting up smart pricing, you have a base price of every single day. But then as that demand begins to change, Airbnb is going to begin to drop and increase those. So as you see, if I use smart pricing, Airbnb is now asking me, hey, do $68 a night for this 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom unit that I said I have in the city center, and it's a king bed. $68 in our minds is pretty cheap for a unit like that. So this is why I typically say I do not opt for smart pricing, because I've always found that the price is lower than what I need it to be every single time, even when they're changing based on demand. So for right now, we're just gonna do a nightly price, that base price of $119. Let's say that we're assuming the same parameters and rent prices and expenses from our slides of about $2,100 for monthly expenses. I'm gonna have my base price at about $119. Okay. So then at this point, there are points where you're able to just go out of here and save and exit. And when you go and you save and exit, and you log back into your Airbnb account, that is then when you are going to be able to go in and see the settings as I see them here. So you're going to have your